Spoilers ahead. Watch out, and take care. The movie begins with Sergeant Bob Lee Swagger and his spotter Corporal Donnie Fenn, on a mission in the middle of the Ethiopian desert. They're about to leave, but a whole army of hostiles appears that wasn't supposed to be there. As both armies open fire, Bob uses his exceptional sniper skills to eliminate as many enemies as possible. Still, bombs explode around them, prompting them to request extraction. Unfortunately, their CIA support team completely disregards them. It cuts off communication, resulting in Donnie's death when a helicopter fires on them. Enraged, Bob fires back and, despite missing a few shots, manages to hit the helicopter's propellers and causes it to crash. He is now a recluse in the Wyoming mountains with his dog 3 years later. Colonel Isaac Johnson approaches him one afternoon with a mission regarding the president's assassination. They have received information that an assassination attempt is imminent, and they need an expert to figure out how and where to stop it. Bob initially declines, but before leaving, Johnson gives him the information anyway, citing his sense of duty. Bob decides to assist after testing the distance the president would be at with his own rifle. He goes to the 3 locations where the president will give a speech and studies every detail, until he concludes that the attempt will take place in Philadelphia. When he informs this, Johnson congratulates him and convinces him to attend the event, so he can be their spotter. Bob also meets Michael Shandor, another ex-soldier assisting with the operation. Bob joins Johnson's team on the day of the event in a room overlooking the site, which they set up with the help of a local cop. When it comes time for the president to speak after the Ethiopian archbishop, Bob warns them that this is the ideal time for shooting, and that they should prevent the president from taking the stage. But they don't listen to him. Instead, the cop shoots at him, while the unknown enemy shoots at the president. Bob is wounded twice, but he escapes, jumping through a window and then through the glass ceiling of a building. While Johnson's team cleans the room, leaving only Bob's rifle, Bob runs through the streets and meets FBI agent Nick Memphis. Because Nick is a rookie, Bob easily disarms him and handcuffs him to a railing, also stealing his car keys and telling him it was all a setup. The police and FBI quickly invade the city, even sending helicopters to pursue Bob. Later, Bob goes to a car wash. While the car is being cleaned, he cuts open the backseat to reach into the trunk and retrieve a first aid kit, which he uses to treat his wounds. After that, he returns to the streets, where after a lengthy pursuit, he finds himself surrounded by cops. He drives the car in reverse and throws it into the river. When the FBI finds the car a few moments later, it's empty. Bob has escaped, hitching a ride on a barge. He returns to the other side of the river and steals a truck, allowing him to drive right past security. Meanwhile, Bob's image is making the rounds in the media. Nick's failure is also being discussed, so his boss informs him that he will be subjected to a review for embarrassing the FBI. Nick recalls Bob telling him it was all a setup, but his boss doesn't believe him, and warns him not to mention it in his report. When it gets dark, Bob stops by a grocery store, but only after turning off the lights, so he can't be seen. After obtaining what he requires, he enters a mechanic's shop to steal a few more tools, and uses their bathroom. He uses the supplies he purchased to create an improvised IV, which he injects. Elsewhere, Nick has been assigned to phone duty, and he receives a call from the grocery store clerk, who believes the man from earlier could be Bob. Nick believes it, recognizing the items Bob purchased as an old method of treating wounds. Still, his boss dismisses him when he attempts to report it. He does not give up and begins researching all the details of the incident, suspecting something is wrong. He stays awake all night in his office. When his co-worker Lourdes Galindo finds him there in the morning, he tells her about all the clues he's discovered. Lourdes informs him that the cop who shot Bob has been found dead, confirming Nick's conspiracy theory. Bob disguises himself as a mechanic and drives for hours, until he reaches Kentucky and meets Donnie's widow, Sarah Fenn. They haven't spoken since Donnie died, but Bob did write her a letter and sent her flowers every year, so Sarah remembers him. She's seen the news and is hesitant to let him in, but Bob persuades her that he's innocent, saying he'd rather let her shoot him than go back. After she informs him that the president is fine and that the Ethiopian archbishop was shot, he gives her a list of supplies she will need to treat his wounds. He inhales the nitrous from the whipped cream cans, while she stitches him up. Meanwhile, Nick investigates all of the buildings in the vicinity of the incident, and discovers tripod marks on the floor of an old bell tower. Then he visits a cyber cafe to speak with some weapons experts, who quickly inform him of the remote-controlled rifles that could have been used in such a situation. When Bob awakens, Sarah informs him that his dog has been shot, because they assumed he wouldn't return. He is determined to clear his name, believing that meeting Nick is the only way to do so. Sarah agrees to assist him, and hands over Donnie's old hunting rifle. The strategy is straightforward. Sarah disguises herself and approaches Nick at a cafe to give him Bob's vehicle's identification information. That way, when Nick investigates the information on the system, Johnson will notice. Sarah executes the plan flawlessly, but Bob, who has been watching from afar, is apprehended by the police, who demand identification. It's not difficult for a trained soldier like him to fight them, and even use their own dog against them, so Bob gets to knock them out and steal a radio before fleeing. Meanwhile, Nick does exactly what Bob predicted, and searches the system for the car information. Still, it's under a level of clearance he doesn't have. He approaches Lourdes for assistance, and after some hesitation, she tells him which case has such clearance, and confirms that the newscasts received heavily edited tapes of the incident. The other part of Bob's prediction also comes true. Johnson's men notice Nick snooping around, and of course they will take care of it. Nick is kidnapped and beaten for information, but because he refuses to talk, the thugs set up a contraption to shoot him, and make it appear he did it himself. Fortunately, Nick is saved at the last minute by Bob, who kills all the thugs from a distance with his rifle. Nick offers assistance in doing this legally, because he can prove Bob did not shoot the Archbishop. Still, Bob only wants vengeance, which the law cannot provide. It may clear his name, but the corrupted names will still be in power, and will do the same thing in a couple of years. Nick agrees to assist, because he has already done enough to lose his own job. While Johnson's men discover Bob's annual flower delivery to Sarah, and dispatch someone to kidnap her, so they can use her as bait, Bob and Nick travel to Tennessee to meet Mr. Raitt, a firearms expert. Mr. Raitt tells them about a technique known as paper patching, which allows a bullet to be fired from one rifle, but appear to have come from another. This is how Johnson framed Bob. They used a round fired by Bob before accepting the mission. Mr. Raitt also informs him that the only other sniper left alive besides Bob, who could have pulled such a ruse as Mikhail Serbiak, whose description quickly convinces Bob that it is Sandor's real name. Nick contacts Lourdes to learn more about Sandor's past, and she gives them the location where they can find him. This is a setup by Johnson, who has ordered Sandor to be Bob's bait. Johnson also solicits a favor from Senator Charles Meacham, who also wants Bob dead. Johnson's men break into Sarah's house late at night. She kills one of them, but the other kidnaps her. Bob and Nick go to a hardware store after they arrive in Virginia, where Sandor is hiding, to buy a bunch of supplies they'll use to make their bombs, because Bob has already guessed there's a trap waiting for them. He also teaches Nick the fundamentals of sniping, so that he can assist as his spotter. When the time comes to act, Nick remains hidden in the bushes, while providing Bob with a location of the guards via the communicator. Bob takes most of the men out one by one, and scatters the bombs they made around the area before entering the house. Sandor isn't surprised to see him and agrees to explain everything. He doesn't know what Johnson's real name is, but he treated Sandor the way he treated Bob. He did it to many other snipers as well: find a wounded soldier, appeal to his honor for a single job, and throw him aside like an old dog. The entire mission has always been designed to assassinate the Archbishop, and pretending the shot was intended for the president serves as a cover. The Archbishop was about to tell the public. An entire village was wiped out so that an oil pipeline could be laid through it, by an organization run by Meacham and Johnson, that exploits economic assets in developing countries. This occurred 3 years ago in Ethiopia. Bob discovers that he unwittingly provided overwatch for that massacre that day, which is why he and Donnie were left to die. As Nick informs Bob that soldiers have arrived and are encircling the house, Sandor admits that he's only been talking to keep Bob inside while backup arrives. Then he reminds Bob that this conspiracy is deep, and that there isn't just one head to cut. He also informs him of Johnson's relationship with Sarah, and puts a gun under his chin to end things on his own terms. As the soldiers break into the house, Bob fights them off, while Nick activates the pipe bombs and gas. Bob leaves the house, using the smoke as cover, and continues to shoot more soldiers as he runs into a safe spot. Nick then detonates the napalm, and shoots any remaining soldiers, allowing Bob to flee safely. A helicopter soon arrives, but Bob is prepared after what happened in Ethiopia. He and Nick flee so the helicopter can pursue them. When he flies over the right spot, Bob detonates a bomb, igniting the helicopter and causing it to crash. They make it to Montana, where Nick calls Lourdes and convinces her to put him on the phone with the boss. Nick only tells them he's with Bob, and that he can't trust them, and hangs up, because the entire conversation is set up for Johnson to track the phone and call them. Bob makes a deal with him. He'll get Sarah back in exchange for Sandor's confession about what happened in Ethiopia, which he secretly recorded. He also requests that the exchange take place with Meacham, for additional privacy. Johnson Meacham, Sarah and her captor agree to meet on a snowy mountain. When a man appears a few steps away and approaches them, Johnson's hidden snipers shoot him, and he falls. But it's all a ruse. That man is Nick, and he's fine. He's wearing a piece of metal under his jacket. He served as bait for Bob to find and kill Johnson's snipers, quickly followed by shooting the thug keeping Sarah. While the FBI receives a letter from Nick informing them of this encounter, Bob approaches the group to conduct the exchange. Still, Nick first orders everyone to lay down their weapons. Sarah uses one of those guns to shoot the thug, in retaliation for what he did to her, and Bob consoles her, finally speaking with Meacham. But it's all for naught. Meacham reminds him of how deep the corruption runs in the system, offering Bob a job. Bob decides to burn his recording right before the FBI arrives to arrest him, realizing how useless it is. A few days later, Bob is granted a private meeting with the Attorney General and other FBI leaders in Washington, D.C. Nick, Sarah, and Johnson are also present. Bob had requested that his rifle be brought from the crime scene, and he now uses it to prove his innocence. Because Bob swaps all of the firing pins out of his guns whenever he leaves the house, this rifle cannot shoot correctly, as evidenced by Bob's failure to fire at Nick. The Attorney General accepts this evidence and releases Bob. Still, he rejects his accusations against Johnson and Meacham, due to lack of evidence. Nick interrupts and shows him pictures of the Ethiopian massacre. Still, the Attorney General claims he can't do anything, because it's outside his jurisdiction. Later, Meacham, Johnson and their assistant are at the senator's mountain cabin, when Johnson is fatally shot, and their car outside explodes. Bob is now at the front door, shooting the security guard, and then the assistant, before pursuing Meacham. When the senator reminds him that he is a member of the United States government, Bob simply replies, "Exactly," and kills him. He puts his gun in Johnson's hand, and breaks the gas pipe, causing the building to explode as he leaves. Bob eventually arrives at the road, where Sarah is waiting in a car. They drive away to begin a new life together. The end. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this. Turn on the notifications, and leave a like to help the channel out.